A dog rescues an injured lion cub and brings it to a man. Moments later, something unbelievable unfolds. The blood was still wet. Max caught the scent on the morning breeze, his ears immediately perking up. The German Shepherd mix stood rigid at the tall grass's edge, his posture tense and alert. Wiping sweat from his brow, James Coleman squinted against the intense African sun. He'd been monitoring wildlife movements for his project when Max suddenly bolted. Over 3 years working together in the Mara Conservation Area, James had learned to trust the dog's instincts completely. "Max, stay," he called, his voice barely traveling across the savannah. The dog glanced back for just a second before vanishing into the grass. James muttered under his breath. With increased lion activity in the area over the last week, being separated from Max in this territory was a nightmare scenario. He glanced at his satellite phone, still no signal. The research station sat over 4 miles away, and his vehicle was parked nearly a mile in the opposite direction. Adjusting his khaki hat, James proceeded cautiously, his hand instinctively resting on the tranquilizer gun at his side. The tall grass swayed gently, creating golden waves across the landscape. In the distance, a herd of impala grazed cautiously, a good sign that no major predators were actively hunting. Still, the unease lingered. Then, a whimpering sound caught him off guard. It wasn't the dangerous growl he'd anticipated, but something far more desperate. James quickened his pace, pushing through the grass until he reached a small clearing. What he saw stopped him cold. Max stood protectively over a tiny lion cub, its fur matted with blood from a deep gash across its shoulder. The cub looked no older than a few weeks. Its eyes were wide with terror, but it was too weak to escape. Max wasn't threatening the cub, he was standing guard, his body positioned between the injured animal and the open plains. "My God," James whispered, approaching slowly. Max looked up, then gently nudged the cub with his nose. The wound was serious, likely from a hyena or a territorial male lion. Without immediate help, the cub wouldn't last the day. James knelt, his thoughts racing. The conservation protocol was clear, non-intervention in natural processes was the standard. But the researcher inside him fought with the human as he looked at the suffering animal. Max ultimately made the choice for him. The dog carefully gripped the scruff of the cub's neck, just as its mother would, and lifted the tiny creature. Instinctively, the cub went limp. Before James could even process it, Max was walking purposefully back toward him, the cub dangling gently from his mouth. "What are you doing, boy?" James asked, though he knew Max couldn't answer. The dog placed the cub softly at James's feet and looked up expectantly, as if to say, "Fix this." James had witnessed Max's protective instincts before with injured animals, but never with a lion cub. Something about this felt different, felt significant. Taking a deep breath, James made his choice. He pulled out his research kit and grabbed antiseptic and bandages. If he was going to break protocol, he might as well do it right. Too weak to resist, the cub allowed him to clean the wound. The gash was deep but clean, not yet infected. Small mercies. "This is temporary," James told Max as he worked. "We'll stabilize him and contact the wildlife service. They can take him to a proper facility." Max sat attentively, watching James work with an almost human-like understanding in his eyes. The dog had been a rescue himself, found abandoned near a village 3 years earlier. James never intended to keep him, but their connection had been immediate and undeniable. Now, Max was an unofficial member of the team, possessing an uncanny ability to track animals and sense danger. As James finished bandaging the cub, he noticed something unusual, a distinctive mark on the cub's ear, a unique pattern of spots that almost looked like a figure 8. He'd seen that marking before in his research photos of the Mara pride's dominant female. This wasn't just any cub. This was the offspring of the pride's queen. James carefully lifted the cub, which weighed no more than 10 pounds, and cradled it against his chest. The little lion's heartbeat was rapid but strong. Its eyes, though clouded with pain, held a fierce spark of life. "The station's too far," James muttered to himself. "We need to get back to the jeep." Max led the way, constantly stopping to look back, making sure James and his precious cargo were following. The African sun beat down mercilessly as they crossed the savannah. James could feel the cub's body temperature rising, a dangerous sign. When they finally reached the vehicle, James quickly created a makeshift bed in the shade using his spare shirt. He gave the cub a few drops of water from his canteen, careful not to let it choke. Max never left the cub's side, his protective instinct in full force. "I need to call this in," James said, reaching for the vehicle's radio. That's when he heard it. The unmistakable, deep roar of an adult lion, close enough to make the hair on his neck stand up. Max's body tensed, ears forward, but he didn't bark or growl. Instead, he positioned himself between the sound and the cub. James slowly turned, his heart pounding in his chest, and what he saw next would change everything. Standing less than 50 yards away was a magnificent lioness, her muscular body tense with alertness. James recognized her immediately from the distinctive scarring on her left flank. Nala, the Mara Pride's queen, the mother of the injured cub. James remained perfectly still, his breathing shallow. Any sudden movement could trigger a charge. The lioness's amber eyes locked onto him, then shifted to the area beneath the jeep where the cub lay with Max. A deep, rumbling growl came from her throat. "Easy, Max," James whispered, barely moving his lips. What happened next defied everything James knew about wild animal behavior. Instead of charging, Nala approached slowly, her body language shifting from aggressive to cautious. Max, surprisingly, didn't retreat. The dog stood his ground, but his posture wasn't threatening. It was almost submissive. Nala stopped about 20 feet away, her nostrils flaring as she processed the scents. She could smell her cub, the blood, and the unfamiliar smells of human and dog. The lioness let out a soft chuffing sound, a non-threatening vocalization lions use with their cubs. The injured cub responded with a weak mewl. James held his breath as Nala took another step forward, and then another. Max gradually lowered himself to the ground, his eyes never leaving the lioness, but his body language communicating that he wasn't a threat. James remained frozen, his mind racing through survival protocols. The tranquilizer gun was in the jeep, but reaching for it now would likely provoke an attack. His best option was to remain still and hope the lioness would take her cub and leave without incident. Nala was now less than 10 feet away, close enough for James to see the individual whiskers on her face and the depth of intelligence in her eyes. She stared directly at him, and in that moment, James felt something profound, a connection, an understanding that transcended the natural barriers between human and wild predator. The lioness turned her attention to Max, who remained in his submissive posture. She approached him cautiously, and to James's astonishment, she didn't attack. Instead, she sniffed the dog thoroughly, processing his scent and seemingly his intentions. Max remained perfectly still, allowing the inspection. After what felt like an eternity, Nala turned to her cub. She gently nuzzled the bandaged wound, likely smelling the antiseptic James had applied. The cub responded weakly, trying to stand but failing due to its injured state. What happened next was perhaps the most extraordinary moment of James's career. Nala looked directly at him again, then deliberately backed away several steps. She sat down on her haunches, her eyes never leaving James, and waited. The message was clear, she was allowing him to continue helping her cub. "I don't believe it," James whispered, his voice trembling with awe. With slow, deliberate movements, he approached the cub again. Max stayed where he was, creating a bridge of trust between human and lioness. James knelt beside the cub and checked the bandages, which were already soaked through with blood. "He needs more than I can do here," James said, more to himself than to the watching lioness. "The wound is too deep." As if understanding, Nala made a soft rumbling sound. James glanced at his watch. The research station's veterinarian team would be in the field for at least another 3 hours. The cub needed immediate attention. With the mother's apparent permission, James carefully lifted the cub and placed it in the jeep's passenger seat. He expected Nala to react or challenge this removal of her offspring, but she simply watched, her gaze intense but not threatening. "We need to go to the station," James said to Max, his voice low and steady. "But how do we?" Before he could finish his thought, Nala stood and walked to the back of the jeep. She jumped gracefully into the open rear section where research equipment was stored and settled herself down. The message couldn't have been clearer if she'd spoken in English. "I'm coming with my cub." James stared in disbelief. In his 15 years of wildlife research, he had never witnessed anything like this. A wild lioness voluntarily entering a human vehicle. It defied every natural instinct of the species. "This breaks every protocol in the book," he muttered, but he knew he had no choice. Max jumped into the back of the jeep, keeping a respectful distance from the lioness while maintaining his protective watch over the cub. James started the engine, causing Nala to tense momentarily before settling again. He drove slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements that might startle the wild predator sharing his vehicle. The research station came into view after 20 minutes of careful driving. James used the radio to alert the staff to the extraordinary situation. "Base, this is Coleman. I'm approaching with an injured lion cub. And you're not going to believe this, its mother. I need the vet team ready, but everyone else clear of the area. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." The crackling response came immediately. "Copy that, Coleman. Dr. Patel is on standby. Area is being cleared. Approach the medical facility directly." As James pulled up to the single-story building that housed the station's veterinary clinic, he could see the staff hurriedly retreating to safe observation positions. Only Dr. Amara Patel, the station's wildlife veterinarian, remained outside, her face a mixture of professional composure and utter disbelief as she watched the jeep approach with its unusual passengers. "James, what have you done?" she asked as he carefully exited the vehicle, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "It wasn't me," he replied quietly. "It was Max. He found the cub and then this happened." Dr. Patel cautiously approached the passenger side where the injured cub lay. "That's a severe laceration. Probable hyena attack. We need to get him into surgery immediately." "The mother," James began. "I see her," Dr. Patel interrupted, her voice remarkably steady. "The question is, will she let us take her cub?" As if in answer, Nala jumped down from the jeep and walked around to the passenger door. She looked expectantly at the humans, then at her cub, then back at the humans. "Open the door slowly," instructed Dr. Patel. "Let's see what she does." James complied carefully, opening the passenger door. Max hopped down and positioned himself between the humans and the lioness, not in a threatening way, but as a mediator of sorts. Dr. Patel slowly reached in and lifted the weakened cub. The lioness watched intently, but made no move to interfere. The vet cradled the small cat against her chest, her professional demeanor momentarily broken by the extraordinary nature of the situation. "Follow me," she said to James, "and I guess see if she'll follow too." They walked slowly toward the clinic entrance, Max trotting alongside them. James glanced back to see Nala following at a measured distance, her eyes never leaving her cub. Inside the clinic, Dr. Patel quickly placed the cub on the examination table. "The wound is deep but clean. With proper treatment, his chances are good." As she spoke, Nala entered the clinic doorway, causing the few remaining staff members to press themselves against the walls. The lioness ignored them completely, her focus entirely on her cub. "I've never seen anything like this," Dr. Patel whispered as she prepared surgical tools. "A wild lioness voluntarily entering a human structure. It defies everything we know about their behavior." James watched as Max approached Nala again, sitting near her but not crowding her space. The dog seemed to understand his role as intermediary between the wild and human worlds. "I think she knows we're trying to help," James said, still struggling to believe what was happening before his eyes. "Somehow she understands." The surgery lasted nearly 2 hours. Throughout the procedure, Nala remained in the corner of the room, watchful but calm. Max stayed beside her, occasionally making soft sounds that seemed to reassure the lioness. The staff observed from a safe distance, documenting every moment of this unprecedented interaction. Dr. Patel worked methodically, cleaning the wound thoroughly before suturing the damaged tissue. The laceration missed the major arteries, which is fortunate, she explained to James as she worked. But there's significant muscle damage. He'll need time to heal properly. Will he make it? James asked, keeping his voice low. I believe so, Dr. Patel replied, her experienced hands moving with precision. He's young and otherwise healthy. The biggest concern now is preventing infection. As she finished the final sutures, she administered antibiotics and pain medication. Now we wait, she said, stepping back from the table. The cub was still sedated, but breathing steadily. Dr. Patel placed him in a recovery crate lined with soft blankets. Normally, the protocol would be to keep the cub in a secure, isolated area, but nothing about this situation was normal. I think we should let her see him, James suggested, nodding toward Nala. Dr. Patel hesitated only briefly before agreeing. Yes, I think you're right. They carefully placed the crate on the floor, and James stepped back, gesturing for the others to do the same. Nala approached immediately, sniffing the crate and the still unconscious cub inside. She made a soft chuffing sound, a maternal vocalization meant to reassure her young. She knows he's going to be okay, James whispered in awe. The next challenge was determining what to do with them. Protocol dictated minimal human intervention, yet they couldn't simply release an injured cub back into the wild. The mother's unprecedented behavior complicated matters further. We have the holding enclosure behind the clinic, Dr. Patel suggested. It's secure, but has access to the outside. They could stay there until he's strong enough to return to the wild. James nodded in agreement. I think that's our best option. The enclosure was typically used for recovering animals before release, a half-acre space surrounded by high fencing with a covered den area and natural vegetation. It offered protection while maintaining some semblance of a natural environment. With careful coordination, they moved the crate containing the still sedated cub to the enclosure. Nala followed without hesitation, padding silently alongside them as if she understood every aspect of the plan. Max walked beside James, his usual place, but his attention remained fixed on the lioness and her cub. Once inside the enclosure, Dr. Patel opened the crate door and stepped back quickly. Nala immediately went to her cub, gently licking his face. The little lion was beginning to stir as the sedation wore off. We should leave them alone now, Dr. Patel said quietly. We can monitor from the observation room. As they turned to leave, Max whined, looking between James and the lions with obvious reluctance. Come on, boy, James called softly. They need privacy. To everyone's surprise, Nala made a soft sound, almost like a call. Max's ears perked up, and he looked at James questioningly. I don't believe it, Dr. Patel whispered. She wants him to stay. James hesitated, torn between protocol and the extraordinary connection he was witnessing. What do you think? Is it safe for him? Dr. Patel shook her head in wonder. I wouldn't normally say this, but yes, I think it is. Max found the cub. He brought him to you. There's a bond there that defies explanation. After a moment's consideration, James made his decision. Stay, Max, he commanded gently. Keep them company. The dog needed no further encouragement. He trotted over to a spot several feet from the lions and settled down, his posture relaxed but attentive. Nala watched him, then returned her attention to her cub, who was now fully awake and attempting to stand on wobbly legs. For the next week, the staff observed an extraordinary relationship develop. The cub, whom they named Kion, grew stronger each day. Nala remained calm in their presence, accepting food from the keepers and allowing Dr. Patel to check Kion's wound regularly. But the most remarkable aspect was the relationship between Max and the lions. The dog had become a surrogate family member. He played gently with Kion as the cub regained his strength, teaching him stalking games that mirrored those he would need to survive in the wild. Nala accepted Max's presence completely, even allowing him to groom her cub on occasion, behavior almost unheard of between different species, especially natural enemies like canines and felines. Researchers from around the world requested permission to observe this unprecedented relationship. James allowed limited documentation but was protective of the unusual family, concerned that too much human presence might disrupt the delicate balance they had achieved. It challenges everything we thought we knew about interspecies relationships, James explained to a small group of visiting researchers. It's not just tolerance. It's active cooperation and what appears to be genuine affection. By the 10th day, Kion's wound had healed remarkably well. The cub was energetic and playful, showing all the natural behaviors of a healthy young lion. The time was approaching when they would need to return to the wild. We should release them back near the Mara Pride's territory, James suggested during the morning staff meeting. Nala needs to reintegrate with her pride, and Kion needs to grow up among his own kind. The team agreed, though everyone felt a mixture of excitement and sadness about the impending separation. Max seemed to sense the changing atmosphere, spending even more time with Kion, as if preparing the cub for life without him. On the morning of release day, James and Dr. Patel prepared the transport crates. Unlike their arrival, this time they would use proper wildlife transport protocols. Nala would be lightly sedated for safety during the journey, and Kion would travel in a separate crate. I think Max should come with us for the release, James said. He deserves to see this through to the end. Dr. Patel agreed without hesitation. Of course, he's as much a part of this story as any of us. The journey to the release site took nearly an hour. They chose a location near where Max had first found the injured cub, an area known to be within the Mara Pride's territory, but far enough from human settlements to minimize potential conflicts. As they prepared for the release, James knelt beside Max. You did something amazing, buddy. You saved a life and showed us something about animal relationships we never knew was possible. Max wagged his tail, his attention divided between James and the crates containing his lion friends. They released Nala first, opening her crate door and retreating to a safe distance. The lioness emerged cautiously, taking in her familiar surroundings. When Kion's crate was opened, the cub bounded out immediately, rubbing against his mother's legs in excitement. The pair moved a short distance away, but then Nala stopped and turned back. She looked directly at Max, who sat obediently beside James. The lioness made a soft chuffing sound. Max whined in response, his tail wagging slowly. In a moment that the witnesses would remember for the rest of their lives, Nala brought Kion back toward them, stopping about 20 feet away. The cub approached a bit closer, playfully crouching as he had done with Max during their time together. She's saying goodbye, Dr. Patel whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Max looked up at James, his eyes questioning. Go ahead, boy, James said softly. Go say goodbye. The dog trotted forward to meet his unusual friend. Kion pounced playfully on Max, and they tumbled together briefly in the grass. Nala watched the interaction without interference, seeming to understand the significance of this final meeting. After a few minutes, Nala made a different sound, a calling vocalization. Kion immediately returned to her side. The lioness looked one last time at Max and the humans who had saved her cub, then turned and walked away into the tall grass of the savannah, Kion following close behind. Max returned to James's side, and together they watched until the lions disappeared from view. We'll monitor them through the Pride's tracking collar, James said, his hand resting on Max's head. Make sure they reintegrate successfully. Dr. Patel nodded, wiping away a tear she couldn't quite hide. What they showed us, it changes everything we thought we knew about animal behavior and interspecies relationships. Max knew, James said simply. Somehow he knew what to do. In the months that followed, the research team documented Nala and Kion's successful return to the Mara Pride. The data from tracking collars showed them thriving, with Kion growing stronger each day. Occasionally during his fieldwork, James would catch glimpses of them from a distance, and sometimes, when the wind was right, Max would stand alert, ears forward, sensing his friends on the breeze. In those moments, James could swear the dog smiled, knowing that somewhere out there, the lives he had changed were continuing, wild and free, exactly as they should be.